I have personally learned so much from the people who I've been speaking to on this series. I think people who go ahead and found recruitment technology businesses are very unusual people that, most people complain about recruiting and then they just next day business as usual. It takes a certain type of personality to decide, you know what, no, I'm going to suspend my life. I'm going to pivot my life in this direction, try and change it. Which is why these conversations have been so amazing. So today I'm delighted to be welcoming to the show. I think a founder of a product that's been really one of the best things to come into recruitment tech over the last 10, 15 years. So it's Steve Bartel, CEO of Gem. Steve, wonderful to see you, man.
Great to be here and glad to be included in this unusual bunch. I
You
take
know what? Let's start with that. Do you think there are personality traits inherent in entrepreneurship?
Good question. Yes, I definitely think, first off, any entrepreneur, I don't care what they tell you, we've all got big egos. So that's for sure. Mostly kidding. I actually only slightly kidding. Probably a lot of
I think
us have
so.
big egos. But in a more serious note, I think um, there's definitely like the hustle aspect of like being an entrepreneur and like needing to roll up your sleeves and actually get stuff done. Like that's probably been the most consistent thing that I've seen across like a lot of entrepreneurs, especially ones that have gone on to build successful companies. You need to be an amazing recruiter. That is
Whether
for sure.
you're doing a recruiting or not, right? Just a simple company building, team building thing. Yep.
100%. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing that determines whether a company succeeds or fails is its people, right? So I think any founder has to be an amazing recruiter. You have to be able to sell your company, right? And you have to be able to sell your vision to customers, that first wave of early customers, investors, and I think most importantly, candidates. Because the team that you bring on board, especially that founding team, that early founding team, that's going to be the foundation for, every future hire and for the company that you build.
Yeah. So two things you would say. At first, let's deal with them one at a time. I think you're right about the hustle. I mean, it's probably a term that took a bit of bashing over the last 5, 10 years or so, 5 years or so, because but it's unmistakable. You need to have high energy. I mean, I don't know an entrepreneur that is a low energy entrepreneur. It seems that they have like more than average, like obviously more than average. Seems to be what is a successful entrepreneur. Um, and maybe that also applies to action orientation as well. It's not just like frenetic energy, externalizing, but there's outputs that seem to emerge from the energy. So the translation of the energy into things that actually it wasn't there yesterday. That seems to be consistent almost again without thinking about the type of business. I'm sorry, I didn't realize the timer was coming on for these lights here. I hope that's okay. But yeah. So for you, Steve, did you always have that sense? I mean, when you were a kid growing up, were you that type of child, or was there a moment when actually entrepreneur Steve emerged?
I wasn't thinking about starting a company though. Like, but when I was 5, I was selling rocks on the street. Like I would go into my neighbors' driveways and I would see these really cool quartz rocks. You know how sometimes people will fill their driveway with quartz, and I thought quartz was the most beautiful rock as a 5-year-old because it's like kind of shiny and almost looks like a gem. And so I
Don't
would my little
don't tell me you stole your neighbor's rocks and then resold them down the street, man.
that's exactly what I did. But I thought I was finding this treasure. I didn't have this concept of a driveway and that I was stealing rocks from my neighbors. But I thought, wow, look at all this treasure. Like I would load it up my wagon and I would walk around the neighborhood selling these rocks. And people thought it was cute, so they'd humor me and they would buy they would buy rocks from my wagon from my neighbor's driveway. But I think that translated to, then every Boston Marathon, I would run a little cookie business where I would bake chocolate chip cookies. And my parents wanted to teach me the value of money and also like working hard for money. So they wouldn't buy the ingredients for me. They would take me to the shopping store. I would use my allowance to buy the flour, the sugar, the chocolate chips. I would math out exactly how much I need to be able to sell all, 200 cookies or 300 cookies or whatever it was for the Boston Marathon every year. But yeah, I think at every turn I was like trying to start these little mini businesses. And I think as a kid, I just wanted spending money. But
Yeah, that's a fantastic story. And by the way, kudos to your parents on this because that type of education is really formative. The idea that money isn't for free, but actually there's input and output. Oftentimes you need to spend money to generate money. That's one of the things that you learn as an entrepreneur. As an employee, you might not actually get that lesson working for pure salary. It doesn't feel like at no point are you spending money, investing money. You're investing time, slightly different things. So I wonder
yep.
whether that education was just fantastic. So second thing we need to obviously establish that Steve Bartel is a mean cookie baker. And to this day, if recruitment technology gets too boring, a bakery is going to be opening up here.
Well, as a kid, my dream was to start a chocolate shop, like where I could sell chocolate truffles that I would make. That was my dream from the age I was like 6, 7 years old. So maybe in the future, like a bakery chocolate shop.
Why not, go tangible after intangible? I do know a couple of entrepreneurs have actually done that, who maybe they're
Yeah.
coming to it towards, they've done well. They don't want to do another, big chew on the tech. And they think, you know what, I'm going to be a barista or something and, try and create something in a different field. But again, hopefully, translating those traits into the new business. Question on those traits. Is it something you actually recruit for as a founder of a new business, this entrepreneurial talent? Do you recruit for that? And if so, how do you identify it?
Yes. So I think I think any founder who's building a company and is hiring their founding team, they should be recruiting for certain entrepreneurial traits as well. And going back to the word like hustle, I agree. Like that's probably not the right word, but you really do want people that can roll up their sleeves and get stuff done. And so I think what you're looking for is builders instead of scalers, right? And so I think when you look at the types of people that are in companies of all sizes, when you get to like a larger scale, hundreds of people, thousands of people, you start to need a lot more scalers, people that are going to take what exists and make it 10x bigger. And the types of things that become more important at that scale tend to be around like, how do you navigate an organization? How do you really effectively collaborate cross-functionally? And it's not to say that collaboration is not important at a startup. It's super important. But actually what you want is, people that have built things 0 to 1, right? And so I think you can find people like that at any type of company. But at a larger company, you might be looking for the person who went and started a new product, or who maybe even was working on internal tools, actually, because there you're building a lot of things from 0 to 1. It's counterintuitive, but like scaling a big consumer product to hundreds of millions of users is probably a lot different from building like an internal tool for an internal set of stakeholders. Like that's a lot more similar to like building a startup for like an early set of customers.
I love the dichotomy, builders versus scalers. And immediately that resonates with me because you can have a super talented person, but if they're actually at the wrong stage of maturation for the company, then they're going to actually not succeed. They're probably going to be unhappy. And actually, they may end up becoming quite damaging to your business because they have their way of doing it, inherently their way of doing it. And it's maybe not compatible. And that goes either way. So sometimes a builder can overstay in a scaling business, right? And I think that's also the case where actually this individual is not suitable for this environment because we've matured to the point where actually we need some structure. We need to have sort of these procedures. You can't just like scrap this one out. You've got to have that level of sophistication. That maturation, Steve, is there like how clear is that point? Does it just flip? Or is it kind of a slow, like one seeps imperceptibly into another, and you as a CEO have got to make the decision, right? Like, who do you hire or who do you promote? Who don't you promote? How did you sort of get along with doing that aspect of it?
It's a gradual shift. It's not a sudden flip, but there is a turning point, where an inflection point, rather, where I think a lot of companies will see this acceleration of like, hey, we need a lot more scalers in the building and we need more process. We need to get better operationally. And to me, actually, that inflection point, while it's a gradual shift, things accelerate around 150 employees. And
Interesting.
have you heard of Dunbar's number?
Yep.
Yep.
Number of people you know, like personally know, is max 150, right?
Yep, exactly. And for that reason, a lot of things need to be built more for scale once you pass that 150 mark. When you're a 100-person startup, when you're a 10-person startup, you can get away with a lot of things that don't scale simply because every single person knows every single person. When you're a 10-person startup, you're best friends with like all your coworkers, and there's so much like inherent trust and like things that you get for free, that maybe you take for granted, even as you start to scale. As soon as you scale past 150 employees, that's when a lot of things start to break down and where you start to get silos in the business. It's when you start to get people building their little empires. It's when teams stop just like organically talking to each other about important things. And that's when you need to create a lot of processes, many of them cross-functional, to make sure that folks are aligned and collaborating well. And so that is, in my mind, like an inflection point on that journey of like transitioning from, builders to more and more scalers, but it happens gradually over time as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant that you've sort of looped in the Dunbar's number there, because you do communicate very differently with people you know and have already established a trust relationship with. You're much more informal, a lot more inference because basically they know. So there's not that need to be, let's say, technically clear as you would otherwise be. And the trust relationship is taken for granted to a large degree because you just assume they trust you and and you trust them. So maybe you don't put the same amount of effort into trust building sort of rituals, which you have to do when you start sort of bringing in people that you don't know. I think real recruitment happens when you're hiring people that you don't know, right? When you run out of your friends, that's
Yeah.
when real recruitment happens. So this is why it's quite funny when you see like really early stage founders talk about their recruitment experience, and you realize, just digging a little bit deeper, that they've never really recruited beyond their friend group.
Yep.
And then you think, you know what, that works when you know people by first name, and that that these people are coded as a nickname in your phone. That's great. It's when they don't know you and you don't know them. That's when you need to put process into play.
Yeah.
And by the way, folks, in case you think Steve is just, a guy who runs, reasonably successful tech startup, he's also a guy that's worked with mega corps, right? So you started life in Facebook, I believe, early doors, and then you worked at Dropbox, and you sort of became senior manager in those places. Tell me about, what did you learn as a kind of a leader as you progressed your way into leadership in those areas, Steve? Firstly, two questions. Objectively, what did you learn about leadership? And then secondly, what did you learn about yourself as a leader?
Great question. So yeah, so I was spent some time at Facebook, and then uh, went over to Dropbox. As a new grad, I was thrust into managing a team at Dropbox less than a year out of school. And so I learned a ton, like everything, all the, early things I learned about leadership, I learned from Dropbox, and mostly by doing, because Dropbox, when I joined, was 25 people, and we were scaling in hypergrowth. We had just started hypergrowth. We'd hit that inflection point right when I came on board. And we scaled to 1,500 people over the next 4.5 years while I was there. And so being a new grad, 9, 10 months out of school, we were tripling every year. And my then manager was like, Steve, I think we might need you to manage the team because you're the most experienced person working on the thing you're working on, and we need to grow it to 5 people. And I'm like, what? Cool. All right. Yeah, I'm up for that challenge. But a lot of the things that I learned about leadership were just by doing. I think one of the early lessons that I learned the hard way was like the importance of performance management. And this is like classic first time leader, first time manager mistake, but I waited way too long to deal with like 1 or 2 performance issues on my team. And it caused like a big like morale hit to the rest of the team. I had actually a top performer leave.
Because your failure to deal with a poor performer.
Yeah, I still remember like, oh man, I still remember this cringe moment I had. I was on a walk with the top performer on my team. He was about a year into the job, and he asked me, he said, like, Steve, like, what do we do if like somebody's not really carrying their weight? And I was like, oh, like, you could talk to him about it. Like, this guy is literally, this top performer is coming to me and like pointing out a performance issue. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm like freezing up, and I'm like, oh, like, I guess you could try talking to him. It's like, that's not his job. I was the manager for the team. And sure enough, 3 months later, this guy put in his notice. And then I had 2 performance issues on my hands. And so I was in a little bit of a hole. And, this, by the way, like I was a first time manager with no support, no coaching, because like we were growing in hyperscale and we didn't have a senior management layer above me. And so I was just kind of learning all this stuff for the first time. But, I went to our VP of engineering, like he coached me through the situation and, managed and really focused on performance for the team. And within 18 months, like, my team was one of the highest performing, and we had the best culture amp scores out of the entire company. Right. So like, definitely learned a lot of lessons the hard way. There's definitely also a kind of happy ending to that story, but some of these things you just gotta like learn by doing them, ideally with good coaching, which is out on.
Coaching is important, but also that experiential learning is important, isn't it? Because I wouldn't know whether you might have read it on the book that getting early action on poor performance was important, but maybe everyone needs to go through that sort of experience. You got to viscerally feel it, and before you're able to act. So sometimes it's a learn by doing situation rather than a learn by reading.
It is, and there's nothing like seeing your top performer quit because you didn't deal with performance as a manager. Like that is the very best way to learn about the importance of performance. And, I definitely took that lesson to heart and tried to not repeat that same mistake ever again. I think the other big thing I learned about leadership is really the importance of recruiting at Dropbox. And that was an awesome environment to learn that, because recruiting was literally our number one priority for those next 4.5 years as we were scaling from 25 to 1,500 people, like tripling every single year. And it was all hands on deck. Every single product design, all hands. We had our VP of engineering up there. Oftentimes Drew, our CEO, would come and they would just share about the importance of recruiting and say, look, team, if there's anything any of us can do to accelerate recruiting, that's got to be our number one priority. It's like the single biggest way we can all have an impact, because if we can bring more great people into the business, like that just amplifies the amount of things we can do as an organization. And so, yeah, it was a really, really cool place to sharpen my skills when it comes to recruiting across all aspects.
Yeah, and hiring at that scale, I mean, basically, you're probably more experienced as a recruiter, just in terms of the numbers of resumes, numbers of interviews, numbers of whatever you've processed, probably more so than most professional full-time recruiters, I guess. I mean, you've gone through that mill. So this draws us back to Gem. Like, well, when did the idea for Gem emerge? Was it during a period within sort of your management career at Dropbox that you think, why, where was the problem, and how did you isolate it in your own mind to think, you know what, someone needs to build something here?
Yeah, so that was the experience that informed starting Gem. It was all of the like hands-on experience because I got to do everything. I was doing tons of campus recruiting. I was giving talks. I was interviewing a ton of people. I was roped in as like an engineering closer where I would meet with other technical candidates and help close, bring them into the business. Not just for my team, but for like a lot of different teams. Um, and I was even rolling up my sleeves to do my own full cycle recruiting. So back, I remember in 2013, I went to our VP of engineering and I said, "Hey, we should start a data science team." And he's like, "Yeah, that sounds great. Why don't you go start one?" And I went to our recruiting team and I said, "Hey, like, we're going to start a data science team." Aditya like signed off and they're like, "That's great. Like, why don't you go hire some?" And I was like, "Oh, can you help?" They're like, "Oh, no, I'm sorry. Like, we have too many P0 roles. That sounds like a P2 role." And so I'm like, "Oh, shoot. All right. How hard can this be?" And for the next like year and a half, I just rolled up my sleeves and was my own full cycle recruiter for hiring our first few data scientists. And so that was super informative, both like managing candidates full cycle from start to finish, but also just doing a bunch of my own sourcing. I was literally, on LinkedIn, reaching out cold to hundreds and hundreds of people. And mind you, this is back in 2013 when data science was still like a pretty new thing. A lot of people were putting data science, just slapping that onto their profile without, much alignment on what it even means. And so, I was like in there sourcing quants from Google and data scientists from like the Facebook team because I knew they had a good team and trying to get people to come on board.
I hope that there's some record of your outreach email at that point,
Yeah.
messaging Steve, because this is archival stuff. There should be it should be in some sort of place of record physically. It'd be great to just see what the heck you were writing there and how successful that might have been. I assume that you managed to recruit team and you were quite successful doing it. And I guess from there, so people who don't know, actually, Steve, you might as well tell people what Gem is. I mean, it fundamentally is about finding people and engaging them in the first hand. So this is where the idea must have emerged when you're doing your own full cycle stuff.
Yeah. So Gem originally was something that helped with a lot of sourcing automation. And so a lot of that experience, like sourcing and doing my own full cycle recruiting, was super informative for going on and starting Gem. But from the very start of Gem, our vision was always a lot bigger than that. So, these days, Gem is sourcing plus a recruiting CRM plus an ATS plus automated interview scheduling, similar to like, Modern Loop and Good Time, plus recruitment marketing technology, recruiting events. You can manage those through Gem, and like full funnel end-to-end analytics that ties all that data together. And on top of that, we have 3 new AI products as well. An AI sourcing bot, something to help with ranking your inbound applicants, and AI ranking for rediscovery. So being able to rediscover folks from your CRM and your ATS that could be a good fit for like that new role you're opening up. So, the Gem platform has gotten really broad over the last 7-8 years. Now that we're partnering with thousands of companies, but when we got our start, we started with that sourcing automation piece because it was one of the most manual and tedious parts of the hiring process, and there really wasn't much to help for it back then.
Yeah, that was a result of you doing like 100 copy and pastes every day, right?
I get sad. I don't know, for folks listening, my head has drooped.
I just saw the trauma on your expressions, Steve. Look, the recruiters know this, and you know what, the technology, that's the place that we're at now in terms of recruitment tech is just would it be magical technology if you just rewind back 10 years or so ago. It's really going to unlock so much more productivity in the recruitment teams, but also improve the experience on the candidate side, because
Totally.
part of the problem with doing an overly manual process from an input point of view, recruiter point of view, is that the output for the candidates is going to be so variable, and usually a significant amount of that variability is bad. So this use of automation and AI is going to improve, or it should, quote unquote, should improve candidate experience also. Steve, when was Gem going to happen? You had the idea. Did you hack around and like create your own little thing whilst you're in as a Dropbox engineering leader, and then decide to spin out, or did you think, you know what, this is it? This is something that is going to work.
All right, so here's the real scoop. Dropbox was the formative experience in terms of like, wow, this is so painful. There must be a better way. But the better way insight came 2 or 3 years later after I'd left Dropbox. So I was kicking around ideas with Nick Bushak, who then became my co-founder for Gem. And we were actually looking at a bunch of different ideas first before we gravitated back towards recruiting. And we were actually looking at an idea in the sales space. And while we didn't get to confidence on that, mostly because like neither of us had really any experience with sales, we were like, holy cow, look at all this amazing tech that exists for sales and marketing teams. And we started to realize that recruiting and sales were a lot more similar than you'd think. And that a lot of companies were starting to take a much more like proactive approach to their hiring, in the same way that sales and marketing teams wouldn't just sit around and wait for customers to come find them. Recruiting teams were selling and marketing to talent to try to get them in the door. And when you think about even like the job of like a sourcer, it's very similar to what SDRs are doing when they're prospecting. And there was this amazing set of technology built out on the sales side for prospecting. Sales had a really great CRM for managing passive talent relationships. They had marketing automation tools for managing their events and their branded emails and their talent communities. They had automation for scheduling and like all of these things. And in the meantime, in the recruiting industry, we were stuck using spreadsheets and trying to cobble together a bunch of like random tools that didn't talk to each other. And we were like, wow, what if we just took a bunch of this amazing stuff that already exists over here for sales and marketing teams and built it purpose built for recruiting teams? And so that was the ultimate insight that led us to go start Gem. It was this combination of that hands-on experience of having like, rolled up our sleeves and actually done a lot of the job when it comes to every aspect of recruiting, combined with this like unique insight into the world of sales and marketing and all the amazing technology that they had.
Yeah, absolutely right. All of us know this as well. Like recruiters, if they have technology, primary thing is an ATS, applicant tracking system, but that's initially just a system of record. It was never there to, it pre-pipeline. Like what the heck were we using? As you say, it was 100 people in a spreadsheet, mail merge, old school. And whatever happened. And yeah, thankfully that kind of category of talent CRMs emerge, which I think you guys probably outright leading player in the day when you were focused on it. And yeah, it made a huge difference. Definitely, Gem had such a significant cultural impact within the industry, I would say, in the sense people became very aware that, oh my God, this is going to just change the way we outreach to candidates. How long did it take for you to get to that point where you were getting that sort of feedback, Steve? Was it pretty much immediate? Like it was like, okay, we hit this straight away, or was there a point where there was a little of like bumping around to different ideas and different sort of approaches before this you hit the sweet spot with Gem?
So we don't talk about this often, but we actually spent 6 months, what I would call random walking through startup space ideas. And we looked at a whole bunch of different things. We would always spend a fair amount of time trying to validate an idea before we went and like built anything. And the way we did that, and still to my belief to this day, the right way to do that is to go talk to customers, go talk to potential customers. And so we would spend 1-2 months on one idea by talking to 30, 50 potential customers for it, be like, oh, well, that was a really bad idea. And then move on to the next, and then the next, and the next. And then it was finally that idea that we were exploring in the sales world that led us to have that insight, to take a bunch of what exists in sales and marketing and bring it to recruiting. And from there, we're like, okay, we feel like this is probably a really solid idea, but we're not going to shortcut the validation with customers. And so we went and talked to 50 different potential customers about how they were managing their top of funnel recruiting, like everything that happens before the ATS. And vast majority of them, 80-90%, were doing it all manually and in spreadsheets. And maybe they were using like Splash That for events, or some marketing automation for newsletters and stuff like that. But the most cutting edge recruiting teams, the top 10-20% of those companies, I remember back then, companies like MuleSoft and Dropbox and others, they were using sales automation tools for their recruiting. They were using SalesLoft, they were using Outreach.io, they were using SendBloom, they were using Mixmax. And we were like, bingo, like that is our thesis. Like we can do so much better if we build something that's purpose built for recruiters, instead of these sales tools that were built for sales. And so that was the like validation that we needed to get started. And those customer conversations that we had, going and talking to 50 customers, that helped us narrow down the MVP, minimum viable product, to just 2 weeks of work. We had a product in 2 weeks of building that we got our first customer onto. And from there, it was just like feedback, virtuous cycle of make it better, 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 better. And that began like, our I'd say first value at Gem, of being customer focused was kind of born out of those early days of how closely we worked with customers.
It reminds me of that Abraham Lincoln quote, doesn't it? I'm not sure it was apocryphal or not, but if you're going to chop a tree down or whatever, you're going to spend if you had 4 hours to chop a tree down, you're going to spend 3 hours and 45 minutes sharpening the axe before you take any swings. And that sounds like almost the perfect analogy is how you ran that as a product early days. That's fantastic stuff, Steve. Let's accelerate down the track. I mean, obviously, since that time, there's been so much innovation happening in recruitment technology. Loads of exciting things have occurred. We have to talk about this AI transformation that we're at this point. I don't think anybody truly anticipated the impact that it would have in terms of human behavior, and also the potential it might have on products and how we use products. But ChatGPT burst onto the scene, and I think the primary value is really to educate people. It was like, oh, now I understand what might actually happen, and it gave the sort of the eyes open type of situation for everybody, and it just changed the roadmap of every recruitment technology product out there. And in fact, it changed the roadmap of all technology products. When you think about it, everyone's rushing out competitors and all the rest of it. How did that AI moment affect Gem? How did you experience it? Did you anticipate what was going on, or do you think, we need to implement this into our experience ASAP?
Yes. So before generative AI, there was always AI in the space. Now, back then, our kind of spicy take was that a lot of the AI that folks were selling, like it sold well, it demoed well, but it wasn't actually driving very much value for customers. We would talk to customers that were trying to use different like AI solutions 3-5 years ago. And most of them were struggling to get the adoption they wanted, get the actual value that they had bought it for. And, from the early days of Gem, we're like, yeah, like it sells well, but we don't want to sell something that people aren't going to use. And I mean, there's like simpler problems to go solve, such as, the just simply sending a follow-up email is like an unsolved problem in recruiting. Like, why don't we stay really focused on like building the world's best automation? But yeah, then generative AI happened, and that changed everything because suddenly a lot more was possible. I think the quality of what you can achieve with AI and the results became a whole lot better, but also like the method for how it works was fundamentally different from what existed before. Previously with AI, you had a lot of these black box algorithms where you don't have any visibility into like the decisions the AI is making and why. With generative AI, um, you can actually just ask the AI and it can tell you like, yeah, here are the 3 reasons why I made this decision, which is super cool from a transparency standpoint. It also gives recruiters a lot more control because you can have a lot more inputs into the AI itself and the algorithm than ever before. And so, previously with AI, there were a lot of pain points around lack of control, like recruiters not being in the driver's seat, lack of visibility and transparency into like the decisions that were being made. It was a black box. Previously, you needed to train it on like tons and tons of data. So like before you would even get value, you might have to use it for months or even a year. And even then you might not have enough data for it to really work. All of those have been fundamentally changed by generative AI. And so when generative AI started to happen and it started to take the world by storm, we thought to ourselves, yeah, we need to jump on this really fast. There's a ton of things that are now possible that weren't possible before.
Can you give us some sort of indication as to what sorts of things made it into the product as a result of this moment?
100%. So um, when it comes to generative AI, anything that has to do with text, um, there's going to be awesome applications. You know, there's so because AI is like taking the world by storm, and like you said, ChatGPT is like the world's best demo of this technology. There's a lot of hype out there, so it's like kind of hard to tell what's real and what's not. Um, my strong point of view is like anything involving text has gotten like 10x better. And so in recruiting, you think about the applications, there's obviously like helping personalize emails that you're sending. So like AI can take a first crack at like drafting. And so that was the first thing that we built into the product. Resumes, though, are another huge source of text. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what a resume is. It's a bunch of text. And so the applications there, I think, are quite broad. So we've been applying AI to sourcing now at the top of the funnel. And basically, we'll take in a list of qualifications and then we'll help go identify net new people, external candidates that maybe you haven't even seen before that could be a good fit for your role. And so we think that's a really great application of AI because at the end of the day, like these profiles are all just like text based and like generative AI is really good at like matching that to a set of qualifications. But you can apply that same technology to rank your inbound applicants. You can apply that same technology to do rediscovery on top of your CRM and on top of your ATS to identify folks that could be a good fit for a role that you just opened up that have already raised their hand, that are already in your system, before you go out to find net new. And so those are fast follow areas of the product that we're launching in the next few months with AI sourcing
That
first.
Yeah, the rediscovery piece puts Gem right into the internal marketplace sort of play as well, doesn't it? I mean, that's been one of the key topics for the last 12 months, I would say, at least for employers. We have to retain staff. One of the key ways to do that is to find some way to circulate people within our business rather than have them leave because, they can't see an opportunity that is within the company. But with rediscovery, that the path seems pretty obvious there. There's not that many steps to go to get there. So very exciting. All of this feels to me like it's going to transform how organizations feel. Like the rigidity of organizations is going to change. Instead of having these very fixed structures, we're going to see a lot more fluidity and a lot more people moving through. And I don't want to drop cliches in, but skills-based hiring is another kind of concept that really landed hard over the last 18 months or so. It feels like some of the technology, some of the product features you're using there aligns very well with the ethos of skills-based hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm curious to get your point of view on skills-based hiring. I think the thing um, my kind of hot take is that a lot of people throw that around as like jargon, as like kind of marketing speak. But it's when you actually look under the hood, like what is it even? It can mean different things to different organizations and to different vendors. I'm kind of curious to get your take on what you've seen. I know you've been focusing a lot on skills-based hiring the last few months.
I've been accused of being a Janus on this because on one hand I'm advocating for the concept of we need additional information beyond the resume to identify skills,
Yep.
and on the other I think that there's a lot of undiscovered but pretty predictable problems with skills-based hiring which are not yet easily solved. So, for instance, things like what is a skill, how we define that, and are we conflating a skill with a trait? We talked about trait earlier. I think we are conflating that because for me, a skill is something that you can learn and it's trainable, and your performance level can vary based on your level of training with it. So you can get better or worse at a skill, but it's not so clear whether you can get better or worse at a trait per se. Another thing with skills-based hiring, and by the way, you started me off, Steve. I'm going to potentially rant for the next 3 hours. Another thing with skills-based hiring, which I haven't resolved it in my own mind, but if a skill is something that you can learn and train, and you can get better or worse at, then why don't we just invest more money in L&D? Do you know what I mean? It's like, why are we recruiting for it? Because if we are saying we can learn this and train it, let's just drop this person into a heavyweight training course and boom, out you go. You got a great candidate. So lots of undiscovered things, but I think fundamentally there is something there, and it's also one of these things I think will happen in any case, because we also know that it's competing against the resume, which we know is already kind of a flawed tool, always has been, which never had anything better, and it will be compromised that way. Leads on to a question that how you're going to deal with AI generated resumes, Steve. So here's the thing. Maybe it's not dominant yet, but I would imagine it won't be too long before most resumes that people would discover through sourcing will have some sort of AI generated component. Doesn't that distance us from what the candidate is? How is Gem going to solve that, or is that not Gem's problem? It's like, okay, we're going to just get you the candidates, and actually the assessment side and all the rest of it, we'll either build a function in future to deal with it, or it's someone else's issue.
Yeah, so there's that. There's also the interesting thing that's happening where AI is making it like 100 times easier to apply to thousands of jobs all at the same time. I don't know if you've heard about that trend.
AI mass supply, man. You know
Yeah.
what? Rewind back, guys. The very first visible experiments on generative AI were developers hacking little products to show how you can actually sort of increase conversion on job interviews. I remember that very, very early on. So I thought, you know what, everyone's going to be in trouble here, because individual devs are motivated to try and break this system. It's going to break. So yeah, how do we deal with it? Okay, we've got AI on both sides. Like, what do you see as the future for recruiters and future for tool makers for recruiters in this scenario?
Yeah, it's a bright future of AI just talking to each other, and it's going to save us all a bunch of time. No, I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. I think between the AI generated resumes and then also AI making it really easy to apply to thousands of jobs, it's going to be a pretty interesting challenge for companies. Companies are already drowning in inbound right now because there's a lot more job seekers on the market, but like this AI technology that's making it really easy to apply for thousands of jobs is really exacerbating that problem, because if there's no cost to applying for a job, why not do it? Even if you're not a good fit, even if you don't want the job. And so I think it's really creating like an even bigger influx of inbound applicants, which is tough because recruiting teams are already drowning in applications and they're already overworked and under resourced. A lot of recruiting organizations went through pretty big layoffs over the last few years, and are now operating at kind of the bare minimum uh, in terms of capacity. And we talk about candidate experience. I know you do a lot of writing about candidate experience, Hung, but like my hot take is that candidate experience has really gone downhill over the last 18 months because recruiting teams themselves are drowning in work. They're overworked, they're under resourced, and they're just trying to like get through all their applications. And so, yeah, it's like really no surprise that there's like a lot of ghosting happening in the
Yeah,
industry right now. And some of
yeah.
that's being driven by, like what's happening with AI on the candidate side.
And that's going to increase, right? So we know that that's not going to stop because, as you say, there's zero penalty in using it. In fact, if you don't use it, potentially you do get penalized. So we've got that really weird situation where everyone is going to pile in because it makes no sense not to pile in,
Right.
even though the overall experience is going to be bad for everybody. So what do you reckon is going to happen? Do employers just stop advertising jobs? I have a feeling they might. It's like, okay, we have to source because if we put a job out there, it's almost like putting a bit of red meat into the Amazon or something, and it's like doesn't make sense.
I know some teams that have done that. It's come to that. I know teams, actually, companies that are opening up recruiting roles that are doing this because they know, like these recruiting teams know, like we know so many great people that we could hire for this, and like actually opening up a role and dealing with the thousands of applicants that maybe aren't a good fit, like might be more work than it's worth. And it's really a shame that it's come to that because there's going to be a lot of good applicants in that pool, ones that they should consider. And so I actually think this is an area where AI has a big potential to help. I think that if AI could help do some of the basic ranking on your inbound applicant pool, so that you can bubble up the people that are the most qualified really quickly and get back to them, um, you know, as fast as possible to still have that high level of like candidate experience for like the real applicants, the ones that are a good fit. I think that's a great application of AI, and it's one that we're looking to launch in the next few months.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be very, very welcome because everyone's inbox is getting nuked. So any solution that goes to convert, 1,000 applicants to 100, I think is going to be very, very welcome. I got an idea, quick one I want to share with you. I think sourcing and adverts will actually merge together because one of the things that maybe we don't want to do is to just put a mass advert that's out there for full public consumption because of this threat of being overwhelmed, almost a guarantee of being overwhelmed. In fact, if the attention that candidates are going to spend on adverts is going to go down, they're just going to set up an automation to say, right, whenever this pops up, the application goes in, customized, it's in. So it's guaranteed to attract this. How about an advert that's a smart advert? It can go and like chase people. You can configure it. Is this still an advert? Then I don't know, but it inserts the advert based on the profile plus behavior, whether you can still track that data or not. But I think it's a form of customizing an advert where the individual recruiter may not be aware that you've outreached in this way. But again, you've just configured it to say anybody with this type of profile that's behaving like this online and this type of function, we're going to hit him with an ad or hit her with an ad in a different place. So it doesn't go to inbox, but they can see it. So yeah, maybe we have this, but perhaps I'm just getting, a little bit too sci-fi with all of it.
I
Steve,
think cool. Yeah, definitely within the realm of possibility.
I think it's there, isn't it? We're in touching distance. Like, what is even possible? Like, it's hard to figure out. But okay. Quick question on entrepreneurship. A bunch of people might be listening or watching to this, and they're thinking, you know what, I want to give it a shot. I've had it with working as an employee. I want to try my hand at this. What's your like 1, 2, 3 advice from your experience as an entrepreneur? What have you learned that you can impart on that young person?
Yeah. So for anyone who's thinking about starting a company, thing number one, in my experience, I would highly recommend you to find a co-founder. It can be a lonely journey, filled of like lots of ups and downs, especially in the early days, pre-product market fit. There are some days that you're going to show up and just want to give up. I had, I'd say, 3 or 4 moments like that over the first year of starting Gem, and I would not have stuck with it without my co-founder Nick. And so that's thing number one. I think thing number two is when you're thinking about a potential co-founder, would highly recommend working with somebody that you know and that you trust. Before working with Nick, I went through a pretty long phase of like trying to do this whole like co-founder dating thing, and it was
That's interesting.
really weird. Like, imagine trying to like validate in like a few weeks whether you want to go spend the next 10 years of your life with someone. It's like getting married. It's like a shotgun
Yeah.
wedding. And I had a few experiences there that were not so great. Like, and it kept reinforcing like, Steve, go back to your short list of people that you've worked with before that you really know and trust, and like try to convince one of them to go start a company. And so, yeah, I think for anyone who's thinking about being an entrepreneur, thinking about starting a company, this is the sort of thing that can take time. And so it's the sort of thing that you can be slowly making progress on even while you're in your current job, is cultivating those relationships with folks you might want to go start a company with, and like carve out some time, nights and weekends just to like brainstorm ideas and like really test out whether you might be a good co-founder fit. And then the last thing,
Brilliant. Let's hold on that. Brilliant piece of advice, folks. You should be doing that anyway, irrespective of whether you want to be, an entrepreneur or not. But it's
totally,
just carving out time to build relationships, cultivating those trust relationships. And these, by the way, should be people you enjoy spending time with anyway. So it's hard to say it's work, but make it a priority rather than something that you neglect, because you never know. And it's very difficult to replicate once you have launched the idea, and then you're trying to pick and choose. As you say, it sounds like a nightmare, like dating is in the modern sense, I would guess. And in fact, I think there's only one example, and I even forget the name of the business, but I can recall only one example where the founder dating thing did actually succeed, and those people are still together as a business, and they're $1 billion market cap, whatever. I can't remember what that business is, but it's rare. It doesn't feel like it's something that is particularly common at all.
It's actually more common than you think for people to go start a company without knowing each other. But the thing is, you don't hear about those because those companies usually fail. And vast majority of startups fail for two reasons. One, co-founders split and the company fails. And so that's like one of the most common. Two, folks give up. Folks give up before they've spent enough time really trying to land on the thing that's going to get to product market fit. Like, those are the two most common reasons companies fail, but you don't see those very often because that's before companies have even gotten off the ground. This is in the first year or two. Yeah, I mean, to round out advice number 3, it would have to be go talk to customers. And my strong point of view on this is to talk to at least 50 potential customers before you write a single line of code. I think too many founders jump into building a product and hoping customers will come without doing the hard work of validating whether the problem is even worth solving. And that's failure mode number 3 that's most common is folks will go spend 3 years building a product for a problem that no one even cares about. And so those customer conversations, it's really important to validate that this is a big enough pain point for enough people. And then that also helps you very quickly understand what the solution space could look like and align on an MVP where you can get your first few customers, ideally in the first few weeks or first few months. Because once you start building with customers, that's when that virtuous flywheel starts to happen of you get feedback, you build it into the product gets better, you get more feedback, people start to refer you to other customers, and things just take off from there.
Yeah, and it's also a piece of pre-marketing as well, isn't it? In the sense that if you're speaking to 50 prospects and you're getting feedback, you can kind of get a read as to who may be a possible a beta tester at least, and then from there, who's the person that might give it a free trial or whatever, and then you're on the roll. So, and by the way, folks, we're talking about tech, but I think this also applies to any other business. I know a lot of people that are setting up. Even in the TA space, they're setting up a consultancy type play or all the rest of it, and they're spending way too much time polishing internal stuff. It's like, yeah, the website, I know the website needs to be built. I know you need to do branding. I know you do need to do all of that. That's all well and good, but you got to immediately speak to people that with your idea and see whether it's, and see what they say. That's your first priority every day until you get to a point where there's a consistent sort of sense. This is a service offering that you can consistently supply. Okay, very good, Steve. Listen, I've been chewing up a huge amount of your time, Steve, so I don't want to take too much more of it. You're a very busy man. Let's get two more final questions. Down the road, you mentioned a few sort of features that are going to be released to the wider audience. Can I grab some dates from you? Like, when is are you confident enough to be able to give us a date, or would that crush the product team? Would that make you the most unpopular CEO in the product team? So when they say, right, boss has said this date.
Yeah, so we have internal dates for all this stuff. Our big new products are all around AI and our ATS. So the ATS, you might be surprised. Like, we've only been building it for less than a year, but we already have 100+ companies using it. And we're onboarding our first wave of customers in the ballpark 500 full-time employee range. And so next month, we're going to be in general availability for any company of up to 500 employees. But we already have verbal commitments from 3 or 4 enterprise ATS customers who are going to co-build that multi-quarter enterprise roadmap. And so as quickly as possible, we're bringing that up market so that we can support our enterprise customers of up to 10,000 employees. I can't yet share about who those customers are, but they're really amazing, exciting, like marquee logos that, you would have heard of, Hung, and anyone listening in, recruiting teams that folks would aspire to. So that's thing number one. I think if I had to put an estimate on the applicant tracking system, is that in the next few quarters, it's going to be ready for any company of up to a few thousand people. And then in 4 or 5 quarters, it'll be ready for companies of up to 10,000. Yeah. So that's kind of like my not signing up the product team for like deadlines, but like, let's just give you like a sneak peek of when it'll be ready. But one of the things that we do is we co-build with customers. So we are looking for the right enterprise customers to be design partners on that. And so that's where we've already got several of those verbal commits, which is really exciting to me. Folks that are actually buying the ATS in anticipation of being able to use it in a few quarters.
That's crazy good. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really amazing traction there. The second big priority for us is on the AI front. So we are in early access right now with a bunch of customers for AI sourcing. And that, I don't want to steal our team's thunder, but let's call it ballpark next month or two. We're going to do a big announcement there that it's ready for general availability. I'm not going to share the specific dates because Jeff, our head of marketing, would kill me, and maybe our product team would too. But the fast follow from there is a lot of the things that we've been working around AI ranking for your inbound applicants, and then also for candidate rediscovery. So we already have candidate rediscovery, like a basic version of that, built into the AI sourcing bot, so that it can source not just external candidates, but also people from your CRM and your ATS. But we're going to be building much more advanced candidate rediscovery features this fall, even on top of that. So AI ranking and candidate rediscovering are coming this fall. AI sourcing should be launching in general availability in the next month or two.
Is
that good in terms of some dates?
No, that's really good, man. I'm sorry, product guys. There are no hard deadlines in any of that, but yeah, really interesting. Steve, let me let you go. You're a busy man. What CEOing are you doing after this call, man? What's the next item on your plate?
Honestly, I haven't even looked that far ahead. I've come from 3 back-to-back conversations this morning with amazing enterprise customers of ours who are interested in being design partners for the ATS, and so I mean, that's one of the reasons why I hopped on right on the hour here. So I don't even know what's next. It's one of those days. I probably more customer calls.
Okay, well, listen, thank you for spending an hour with us, Steve. It's been wonderful having a chat with you. I think we could talk for several more hours. Been great just to knock a few ideas around, and looking forward to seeing and supporting your success going forward. Very exciting to see. I mean, your achievement at GEM's been fantastic, and I really think that some of the features that you're looking to put into the market are going to be really plus for the recruitment community. So thank you and well done to all of that. Steve Bartel, CEO of GEM, thanks for coming on to Founders Focus, man.
It's good to see you, man. Talk soon.
Wasn't that great, folks? Steve Bartel. Do follow Steve, by the way, on LinkedIn. He is also a very astute commentator on there. So obviously, you're not going to be able to get sort of too much one-to-one time with Steve, but following him on LinkedIn does give you some access to his thinking and his observations as to how the recruitment market is playing out. Make sure you go ahead and do that. Okay, that's about it. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll be back. Obviously, we've got Brain Food live on air this Friday. We're going to be talking about a new job as a recruitment leader. Thankfully, a lot of our friends who've been sort of on the market have found jobs recently. We're going to bring a bunch of them on screen, and they're going to tell us about what their 100-day plan is and how it should look like. Because I think it is super important that you're coming in and landing, running in a market like this. So make sure you tune into that. If you enjoyed this series, follow the channel. We're going to keep rolling forward with Founders Focus as soon as we can get CEOs to volunteer for it. Okay, everybody, that's it. Thanks for watching.